Alright guys, it's Richard here. So we had an interesting day at work today. We had an M140i in for a stage 1 map. And it's a quite interesting car to map because it's one that's really popular to tune by sort of many companies out there. But it's also one where there are so many people being taken for a ride with. They're being told that they can get 450 horsepower just a map, or 480 brake with just doing exhaust and a map, and the truth of it, it's not true. And what makes it worse is this is some big companies out there, big reputable names that are producing figures that just aren't plausible. The other side of it is that people are being charged ridiculous amounts of money for it, and no one understands how dynos work or the in-depth of tuning, and they just see it as a witchcraft that, you know, some really good guys can charge loads of money for just to get the best result. But the truth of tuning is that one competent mapper over another can't make a car faster than another. So you've got to remember one principle of an engine: it's an air pump. It pumps air in, it pumps air out, and the amount of air it pumps determines the amount of oxygen it's got going through it. That amount of oxygen determines how much fuel you can mix, and the amount of fuel has a certain amount of energy, and then you can convert that energy into work to move you down the road. Two tuners side by side on the same car will get the same amount of airflow. That is mechanically limited, and there's nothing you can do as a tuner to produce more airflow than is physically possible. So what's going on then? How come some company can charge you £1,200 for a remap for your BMW, but apparently you're saying that you don't get this extra power? Well, unfortunately, there's lots of manipulation going on there, a lot of marketing, and a lot of hype. So let me tell you about a story we had back a few months back. We had a customer come in who had a BMW M2, which we remapped on our dyno, and we produced a graph saying 430 horsepower. Now his mate was all cocky saying, oh, but I got 460 horsepower. And it turned out that he had a graph saying 460 horsepower. But when you put the two cars on the road side by side, our car was the same, if not slightly faster. So how is that? Surely the 460 horsepower car should be faster than the 430 horsepower car. You'd think, right? Both cars were tested on a Dynamics dyno. Now, while Dynamics is well renowned for giving accurate figures and being normally a heartbreaker dyno, there are some problems with it that can be exploited by, shall we say, less honest tuners to make themselves look better than the rest. So the first one I'm going to show you is roller climbing. So when we tuned this car to 420 horsepower, which is exactly the figure we expected to make, we then set about doing the simplest, most common trick that people are doing to make more figures, particularly on the BMW scene, and that's roller climbing. So what I want you to watch is the video where I run the car, I've then gone round, I've released the straps to take the tension off the straps, and I've allowed the car to climb up off the idler roller onto just the drive roller. So on the dyno, there's two pairs of rollers for each axle. The front roller, which is gripped, is the drive roller. This is the roller that measures the amount of power and transmits the power into the dyno's brake. There is also a second set of idlers for stability, which sit on the rear of the tyre, called the idlers. If the car leaves contact with the idlers, the software does not know that that has happened. More power will be transmitted to the drive roller, where the brake measures an increase in power, but the software will still count the idler roller's amount of power loss. All moving components in the dyno have inertia, whether it be the dyno's roller, the drivetrain, the car, whatever. The idler has a certain amount of inertia. The software is going to count that inertia being accelerated, regardless if the car is in contact with it or not. And so the correct way to dyno a car on Dynamics is to have the tyre in contact with both the drive roller and the idler roller at all times. The car must not lift forward, then drop down, otherwise you're inflating your figures. horsepower up from 420 just by loosening some straps. And for any tuner out there that says you're supposed to roller climb, no. If you look at the calibration file of a dyno, you will see the total inertia of the drive roller, the idler roller, and if you add the driveline inertia, which accounts for the gearbox and wheels and drive shafts, together, and check the TN flag on the bottom of the graph, you will see the total inertia, TN, printed, which will add up to all three. At no point should you ever roller climb. So how much effect does roller climbing have? It depends on the acceleration rate of the car. If the car is accelerating, say, maybe 10 kilometers an hour per second, you might see a 20 horsepower increase. If it's a faster ramp rate of 15 kilometers an hour per second, you might see 30 horsepower increase. And get this, if you're dying a four-wheel drive car, well, you've got two axles and two sets of idlers, you could see anywhere between 50 and 60 horsepower inflation just by loosening the straps as the car climbs up. But that's not 500 horsepower. My video title promised you 500 horsepower with no mods. Well, here's the next thing we're going to play with. Atmospheric corrections. Just by manipulating the correction factor on the dyno, you can make it increase the numbers it shows on the screen. A correction factor is there for old school natural aspirated engines, so when the air got thinner or thicker based on temperature or pressure, the figures wouldn't change, and you could keep the same figures all year round and know if a mod you made 6 months later actually improved things, or you really actually just lost power or gained power because the weather changed. Now, a modern ECU shouldn't use correction factors because they already determine their boost pressure on the day based on barometric and ambient temperature. On a hotter day, they will actually run slightly more boost. On a cold day, they will drop their boost ever so slightly to make sure they make the same power all year round. Hence, a correction factor should not be used. If a correction factor can't be turned off, it should be neutralised and set to 1. 420 horsepower times 1 is 420 horsepower. But if you manipulate the figures ever so slightly, and you make it so it's times 1.05, you'll get 5% more in your figures. If you make it 1.1, you'll get 10% for free. So, and it's an extreme example of how silly this can get, I'm going to drop the dyno's temperature probe into a boiling cup of water. The water's about 70 degrees right now, and you'll suddenly see an inflation of figures by about 20%. There you go, all you need to make your car faster is a cup of tea. You don't need a remap, just a cup of tea. 500 horsepower straight away. So how do people get away with this? Well, if you look on the bottom of any dynamics graph, you'll find a green section. It's a green box at the bottom on a DOS dyno, and on a Windows dyno it's a green box somewhere on the screen. This green box shows you several values that are important. Air temperature, barometric pressure, relative humidity, inlet temperature all affect the actual correction factor applied to the car. You should make sure these numbers are realistic. If you know your today is about 20 degrees Celsius and your graph says that you're in 40 degrees, something's wrong there and someone's trying to manipulate your figures. Additionally, if they try to hide that box by printing a graph, when there are some weird key combinations you can do by closing graphs, reloading them and so on, that will hide this box, they're trying to hide something from you. All graphs should show that green box and show you all the figures that we use. And any competent tuner or dyno operator can look at that green box and say, that's been played with. Because all the temperature values, pressure values should be plausible. Secondly, you can see the total inertia used and the shootout mode used on the dyno to make sure they're all correct and plausible for the vehicle being tested. So if you combine this with a video evidence of your car roller climbing, you know you've been cheated. If the figures in your graph don't look right, you've been cheated. The best thing to do is watch your run and make sure your car does not lift up and drop down during the run. It should sit flat and stationary on the dyno, the wheel should remain in contact with all rollers at all times, and ask to see the correction factor on the dyno. The screen should show you exactly what factor is being applied. It is simply a case of taking the number the dyno reads times the correction factor. If you want to reverse it, take the number on your graph, divide by the correction factor, and you can see the actual real number that was produced before the manipulation. So I hope you find this video interesting, and I hope it shows that just spending lots of money, or competent tuner can. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure if you watch people's videos online, you'll soon just work out who's doing it. Anyway, thanks for watching.